Hi everyone, I'm Jarek from Independent Power. I'm in Taranaki today, right under the Mount Taranaki when Mike and Lolly and his family set up their business and their home. Michael is well known for his extensive knowledge in design and installation of standalone power systems. You are particularly passionate about innovative approach towards the microhydro. Here's the example, by the way. Michael 20 years ago established a company called PowerSpout, and since then Michael is manufacturing microhydro turbines in Taranaki and sells it to the clients all over the world. So today with Michael we're going to explore what is really important when you going off the grid with power generation, either solar or microhydro. So the first thing I think it is important to distinguish when does it make sense to go off the grid, or where does it make sense to stay grid tied with your renewable generation?
Yeah, well, we went off grid because there was quite a significant cost to hook to the grid. So I think to answer that question, if you're already on the grid, you should stay on the grid. If you've got a high grid connection cost in the order of $20,000 to $50,000, which would be quite normal for rural New Zealand, you should consider an off-grid system. And an off-grid system would suit a family who are relatively modest in their power consumption. If, however, you want to do it all, have everything, then maybe a grid-connected system would be more appropriate.
Yeah, so it's always a balance between your needs and the costs.
Yep, we're all different. We all have different consumption profiles. And so it's very important to understand how much power you need, and are you prepared to be careful at certain times when there's no sun, or do you want to have it all, the electric car, the hot tub, the sauna, etc.
So I think it's important to mention that the average house in New Zealand consumes over 20 kilowatt hours a day.
Yes.
And when we take people off the grid, it's usually for, let's say, average family of 3-4 people between 6 and 8 kilowatts. So there's a lot of work with energy optimization before really a system is even designed.
So in order to reduce your consumption, some of the main ones are obviously how's your water heated. Normally in a solar system you'd use surplus power. In a hydro system you might be generating lots of power and can have hot water. So it really does depend on your needs and what resources you have and the magnitude of the investment you want to make. So not everyone's equal. Some people have lots of money they want to spend, some people are modest, some people have low budgets. So it's all about finding what your needs are, what you're trying to achieve, and can that problem be solved for the budget that you have.
That's right. How about the grid-assisted systems?
Okay, so with grid-assisted, well, if I explain initially what a grid-tied system is. So grid-tied is when you have a system, it generates its own power, and when there's surplus, it sells it to the grid. So in a PV system, that might be during the middle of the day, and at night time, when the sun's not shining, you purchase power from the grid. So that's a grid-assisted system. You can then have a grid-assisted, that's a grid-tied system. Right. Get the words right. So that's a grid-tied system. You can also have a grid-tied system with a battery in. And so instead of selling all of your power, you can keep some behind for use later on.
That's right, but one important thing, which is sometimes misleading, if you have a grid-tied system with the batteries, if there is a major power issue and there's suddenly lack of power for 2 days, you can only use actually the energy stored in the batteries. They are not getting charged back. So it's not a backup system that will let you be off the grid for a long time. It just gives you a couple of days.
So a grid-tied system with a small battery is not going to be able to power significant loads in your house for long. Your electric oven's not going to be working, your hot water's not going to be working. So if you want a significant system that will still work when the grid's down, then you can have what's called a grid-assisted system. So this is where you have a fairly large off-grid system, but instead of having a noisy, polluting petrol engine supporting you, the grid supports you. And that can be a very cost-effective system because you're only paying for the power that you use from the grid, and that's much lower cost than running a fuel generator to achieve the same result. So grid-assisted systems are a really good solution if you don't want to take the full plunge of being off-grid where when you're off-grid, of course, you've got to help. You've got to find support from a genset, or you have to reduce your consumption when the weather's not suitable.
And by the way, in the grid-assisted system, the grid works as a generator. So if you need more power, you always take it from the grid. But there's two types of grid-assisted systems as well. Wouldn't like to complicate it too much, but in the recent days, people really like to explore options of being self-sufficient and resilient in case of a major disaster. And we have a few risks here in New Zealand. So the need that is behind is to keep you ongoing even for months, even if the grid is completely down. So we have a grid-assisted system when you could completely go off the grid with your essential loads, which means that you put your refrigeration, you put your lights, and maybe a couple of sockets for the computer. And if the grid goes down, your grid is basically an off-grid, your gear is an off-grid gear, and you have enough batteries to keep you going on that essential circuits for 2 or 3 days, and then charge back from the solar or from hydrogen.
I think it's fair enough to say there is an infinite number of solutions, and we have to find a solution that meets the client's needs, and every client will be a little bit different. We're an off-grid system, and we work reasonably well because we've got solar PV, these panels behind me, and we've got some hydro turbines. So when it's raining, which it is today, we're generating most of our power from hydro, and on a nice sunny day, it's mainly from solar. And when one's up, the other one's down, and vice versa. So the amount of power we generate each day is about the same. But if you don't have hydro, and a lot of clients won't have hydro, then you've got to use solar PV, and hence you do need some sort of backup. A battery can only back you up for a relatively small period of time. So you either need the grid to back you up, or you need a genset. And I think a lot of people moving into renewables, particularly in New Zealand, where 80% of our power comes from clean, green, renewable sources, you don't want to put in a system that's heavily reliant on fossil fuels, because what's the point? You may as well stay hooked to the grid. So it's about getting that balance right.
Yeah. And when we talk about solar and hydro, what's more economic in New Zealand?
Okay, so if you have a very poor stream with hardly any water and a small drop, solar is going to be more economic. If you have a great river with a 60-metre drop and 10 litres per second and it's right near your house, hydro is going to be more economic. And it depends where you are. So some clients will be able to power all of their house from a hydro turbine. Some clients might be able to power their house in winter time on a hydro turbine. And remember, in winter, the solar PV system isn't going to work that well. So it's all about looking at the resources available and do they match the needs of the family and the budget of the family. And that is not an easy question to answer. If someone says, oh, can you give me a quote on an off-grid system? Well, you can imagine there's a lot of conversations that have to occur before you can give an accurate quote.
I think conclusion here is that every single standalone system is custom-made design.
It is. So every system is sort of steered for the needs of that client, and it's really important to work with equipment that is scalable and is good quality. So if you do want to increase the size of the system in the future, the initial system that you put in allows for that to happen. And it's just about talking to other people that have lived off-grid. That's a good start. Talking to reputable installers about what's the best equipment to use, and getting a few quotes and making a final decision.
Yeah. So talking about quotes, and so what if someone decides, okay, well, the line company wants to charge me $30,000 or $50,000. I really want to go off-grid. It makes all the sense. How does the procurement process looks like?
Okay. Well, initially, before you start asking for quotes, you need to say, how many kilowatt hours a day do I use? And so that will be on your power bill. So you probably live on the grid at the moment. Look on the back of your power bill and there'll be a summary of how much power you've used each month. That's a good start. We might decide that some of the things that you're currently doing...
So let's say I'm living in an average New Zealand home, it's 20 units a day.
20
units a day would be quite expensive.
Yes. So what we could do, we could take off the oven, make it gas. We could take off the hot water, make it gas. So there's two things there that could significantly reduce. We're also probably building a new house which will be more energy efficient.
That's right.
And so those things combined could reduce the power consumption of a house from typically 20 to maybe 10. And that would be...
Any conversion of electricity to heat should be avoided. And this way we can actually reduce the amount of the energy units needed and then save on the basically on design and installation of the system.
So I think you need to be realistic. If you've got a modest budget, let's say you've got a $30,000 or $40,000 budget, you could do a system like that. But if you want to have a bigger system and you do want to heat your hot water with electricity, you can for probably 9 months of the year. But it'll be very difficult to heat the hot water on a rainy day in the middle of winter from solar. And you've got to be realistic.
So what are the hurdles and pitfalls of the process?
I think the hurdles possibly are just trying to avoid mistakes. It's very easy to sort of pick the lowest quote and then come to regret it. So sure, get some.
What's wrong with the low quote? I mean, it's great. I mean, I'd rather spend less than more.
I'm not saying you should go out and spend truckloads of money, but what I am saying is you need to. It's a bit like if you had a house built. You're going to get various quotes, so you need to investigate. And you're about to spend anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 typically. So you need to be diligent and make sure the system that is being put in meets your family's needs. And I would start by looking at good quality equipment that has a 5-year warranty. So my benchmark is if it doesn't have a 5-year warranty that's supported in New Zealand, we don't specify it. Because we want our customers to have confidence the equipment's good. So that's my bottom line. But everyone's different. And they need to make those decisions.
Yeah. So any other hurdles on the way, pitfalls? Where are the risks?
The risks, well, the risks are complacency. So, for instance, we have a guest house here, and visitors come to stay, and they bring with them portable heaters. We tell them not to use them, but they do, and that can actually cause us to run out of electricity, which is a bit of a nuisance. So, I think what happens is you get this lovely off-grid home, you move into it, and it works fine. And then you go, oh, I'll just buy that, and I'll just buy that, and I'll just buy that. And the girls and the family have got older and they're using more power. So you have to be aware that your consumption of power will increase over time, and therefore you have to invest in upgrading the system as your needs change, and your needs will change.
And so, in different words, make sure that your system is extendable and consider that in the design phase. How about the installation and commissioning and the first year of use? Any risks there?
Certainly use installers who are familiar with the equipment they're installing and have got a good track record. Installation is very important and it's a significant part of the total cost. So a good installer will install all the system correctly. They'll do some training with you. They'll probably do a guide to help you when they're not there, just the key points of things that need attention.
Proper manual.
Yeah, and there'll hopefully be some online monitoring so that you can look at your system and see if there's anything not quite right. And likewise, your installer can look at the system and give you a bit of advice from time to time.
So installer picking the right installer is a very important decision. So what you're saying is track record and a track record in the off-grid installation, because there's a big difference between the grid-tied installation and off-grid.
It is. So if you've got an install company that says, oh, we've done 1,000 installs, how many of those have been off-grid? And you may find that only 5 have been off-grid and the rest have been grid-tied. So grid-tied is much, much easier than off-grid because you never run out of power when you're grid-tied or grid-assisted. But when you're off-grid, you can run out of power, and that can be difficult to deal with in the middle of winter on a wet day. So it's important to make sure you've got a solid system, it's well supported, and if the odd problem crops up from time to time, which does happen, then it is dealt with quickly and swiftly.
It would be good if it's a local person as well, so if something goes wrong, then they're available. So and also reviews might be a good idea. Those days you can find the reviews in the internet. I think personally it's best to call someone who already dealt with that installer and check it, verify. It's people are spending a lot of money on it, so it's a decision that will matter.
Yeah, so if you're looking for a review and the company has, these are all clients, call them. Well, of course, they're not the people to call. What you want to do is find some clients who've been with the system for 3 or 4 years and they've gone through a number of winters. How has it gone?
Not after 3 months.
No, not after just a summer season, because everything will be fine in summer. It's can you get through 2 or 3 winters? Usually problems start to show themselves usually on the 3rd winter, because as the batteries are cycled deeper and deeper, their capacity reduces over time. A good system shouldn't give you any significant problems for 5+ years, but as your complacency sets in and as your demand for power increases, you need to keep an eye on that. And logging will help. You can say, hey, look, when we put the system in, you use 10 kilowatt hours a day. Now you're using 15. Really, the system should be expanded a bit.
That's right. And another important part is the batteries, actually. It's usually half of the cost.
It can be a significant part of the cost.
So how do we pick the right batteries, actually? There's a lot of choices, different technologies. What do you advise?
Well, there's always the perfect battery just around the corner. And whoever you ask, you'll get a different opinion. But lead's been around a long time. Good quality sealed lead can give life expectancies of 10+ years. Yep. If you compromise on the battery, put one in that's too small, that's cheap, you're not going to get a 10-year life out of it. You could get anything from 3 to 5 years. And the battery will need to be replaced, and that's your biggest ongoing cost. And I always say to people, battery life will cost you somewhere between 1 cup of coffee a day and 3 cups of coffee a day, depending on the quality and whether the battery is well suited to your needs. So that's an ongoing cost, and you need to put money aside to replace your battery one day.
True, because after hopefully 10 to 15 years, you're going to have to spend again.
You're going to have to spend again.
So
absolutely.
When I look at the choices in the batteries, there's few things that I follow. It's first of all, I would only use tier 1 manufacturers. I'm talking about companies like Exide, NSS, UASA.
Yep.
Those guys, they are on the market for centuries almost, some of them 140 years even. They really know the battery business. I wouldn't go for tier 1 or tier 3 unless I'm very constrained on the budget and I know that I will be replacing the batteries in 3 years.
Yep. Yep.
The second thing is, do they have a local representation in the country? If you buy batteries from somewhere far away and something goes wrong, one cell is off, you need another cell, who are you going to call? How do you replace that? It's very important that those guys are available locally and give you after service that is superb.
I think the battery issue is particularly poignant when you're only a solar powered house, because you're very dependent on that storage. Sure. If you've got hydro in the system, you probably could go down a battery grade, because the battery's full most of the time and it's got a smaller job to do. So there are some cases where you can compromise, but if you're solar only, battery is key. Make sure you've got a really good warranty. Look at the warranty terms, and if those warranty terms require the system to have logging as proof of care, then make sure that's in. And so that if there is an issue with the battery, it will be swiftly resolved because the supplier was reputable, and are the terms and conditions easy to understand? Because if they're not, they probably the warranty is not worth the paper it's printed on.
And I wouldn't compromise anything below 5 years warranty.
Yeah. I think that's a good starting point. Most reputable manufacturers have a 5-year warranty.
So how do you avoid the confusion and struggles related to making the right choices? What I'm really wanted to explore is if we put ourselves in the shoes of someone who's going off the grid, they will call several companies and everyone will tell them, my gear is the best.
Well, every salesman says that.
Every salesman will
I think they're not, don't believe a salesman.
So make your own homework, that's what you say?
Be diligent. Look for good quality kit with 5-year warranty. That's well supported, that's got a warranty that's serviced from a New Zealand depot. Because it's no good having a warranty with some obscure manufacturer out of other side of the world, because when there's a problem, it'll take months and months to fix it. And how are you going to power your house while it's down for months? So yeah, a good company would have something sorted out for you within a few days. Yes, it'll be a slight inconvenience, but that's life.
That's right. And how about the heating new build houses from renewable energy generation? What options do we have? And I'm specifically talking about those new houses which are superbly insulated, like for example passive houses, right? Yep. They can't use anything flammable inside of the house, so we can't put cooking on gas. Yep. We have to have an induction gas. We probably have to have a heat pump, but that all comes from renewable energy generation, either hydro or solar.
Yeah.
This might be tricky here. So what can we do here? What options are there?
Well, first of all, if we're talking about hydro, so let's assume you've got a hydro system. It's raining in the middle of winter, it's cold, you've got heaps of power, put in a heat pump. Easy. Lots of our clients do that. What a heat pump does...
Small heat pump.
Yep, a small heat pump, maybe a 500 watt heat pump that'll push out 2,500 watts of heat.
Yeah.
That will be great. That could be on all the time because you've got a 1,000 watt hydro. That'll be a great way to heat your house.
And you have a well-insulated house, so there's
Yep.
no problem. You rectificate that all over the
Yep.
house and you sort it. But you need to have a hydro. What if you don't?
Right, if you don't have hydro, it's tricky. In winter time, you get weeks of rain followed by a week of sun. So the amount of available solar power coming in varies greatly. So there may be some days you could run the heat pump, but you can only heat your house during the day. You can't be running a heat pump at night because you'll be flattening in the battery bank, and you'll need that power because the following day might be wet. There'll come a point, if your house is cold and you need to heat it with a heat pump, there'll come a point where you need to run a fuel generator to lift the charge of your battery and run the heat pump. That is an option, but you need to minimize that. The best way to minimize it is to have an energy efficient house to start off with that doesn't need much heating, and to be sensible. So we're not trying to take you off grid and put you on a generator. We're trying to take you off grid and give you some more freedom to enjoy the benefits and the financial benefits of living off the grid and that independence. So every client's different, and you just need to get to understand why. I often ask the question, why do you want to live off grid? And see what they say. And I think that's quite revealing. So ask yourself that question, why do you want to live off grid? And if that answer is, I want to save money, okay, tick that box. Is it because I want to be 100% renewable? Is it my carbon footprint? Is it, I want to do it just because I can? You know, I would probably be in that category.
I really don't like companies. This might be the answer.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, everybody has different reasons, and I think if you can understand the reason why somebody wants to do something, you can find a solution. And so it's about that conversation.
So, another question, Michael. You live completely off the grid. Your workshop is off the grid. Your multiple accommodation is off the grid. Your home is off the grid, and you have a one EV off the grid. What would you advise to those who want to have an electrical vehicle hooked up to the off-grid power system?
Okay, well, if you're off-grid and you've got an electric vehicle like we have, you need to have a fairly big system. And that would be in the order of probably 10 to 20 kilowatts in size. Then in the summertime, you're going to have lots and lots of power, and you'll be flying into town every day in your electric vehicle. You'll have so much power you can heat your hot water. When winter creeps up on you, you might be going, haven't got quite enough power today for the car. So you're driving to town and you use the charger in town. Yep. That's preferable to using a petrol engine to charge your battery, to charge your car. Yep. That's not a good thing to be doing. So again, it's about balance, and that's exactly what we do. So today you saw our electric car wasn't used. My wife took the petrol car. So sometimes having two cars, two small cars, one's electric, one's petrol, on a good sunny day, the car can charge. Then on the rainy day, you take the electric car in. On the sunny day, you're taking the petrol car, so the electric car can charge. Right. And also, what about using an electric bike on a nice sunny day? Because then your car can be at home and be charged. So sometimes an electric car with an electric bike is a good solution too.
Michael, thank you for that. I really hope it is going to be useful for those who are going off the grid. And yeah, that knowledge can be shared and passed further.
Good, no, it's a pleasure, anytime. Okay.